I sing of arms and the man, he who, exiled by fate, first came from the coast of Troy to Italy and to Lavinian shores, hurled about endlessly by land and sea, by the will of the gods, by cruel Juno's remorseless anger, long suffering also in war, until he founded a city and brought his gods to Latium. From that the Latin people came, the lords of Alba Longa, the walls of noble Rome. Welcome to Hot Takes on the Classics. My name is Emily Maeda, and I am joined by Tim McIntosh, who will be taking us through Virgil's Aeneid during this season on war. And I just read you the opening lines to Virgil's Aeneid. So, hey, Tim, how's it going?
Hey, Emily. Really well. Really well. Emily, I love Virgil's Aeneid. What do you think about Virgil's Aeneid?
I love Virgil's Aeneid, too.
Yeah.
Which I kind of feels like a controversial thing to say, because a lot of people say they don't love it.
I think a lot of people compare it to Homer for reasons we're about to dig into. And sometimes people will say, oh, Virgil, he just kind of steals plots from Homer. And that, I think, is a not terribly sophisticated view, because he's actually paying homage to Homer in
absolutely
stealing his plots.
Absolutely. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right?
That's exactly right. So let's talk about the Aeneid, and I'll talk a little bit about who Virgil was. This is a great epic poem on war. Only half of it, I should say, is actually about war. That's the second half of the book. The first half of the book is a little bit like, or maybe a lot like, Homer's Odyssey. It's the story of a man trying to get somewhere, and he's thwarted by the gods and storms and warring parties and crazy sea monsters. Emily, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say it's the reverse of the Iliad and the Odyssey, right?
It is. Yeah,
the Iliad
that's exactly
comes
right.
first, and then the Odyssey. But with Virgil, we have the wanderings first, and then the wars.
The book, the Aeneid, was written sometime between 30 BC and 19 BC. So this is after the time of Julius Caesar, during the reign of Julius Caesar's nephew. And who is that, Emily?
Caesar Augustus, also called Octavian.
So those of you who know your Christian New Testaments well know that Christ was born during the reign of Augustus Caesar. So Luke 2, and it came to pass in those days there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. Emily, it is rumored that Virgil read portions of his poem, the Aeneid, to Caesar Augustus and his sister.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because Caesar Augustus commissions it, right?
That's right. He commissions it.
He wants this to be the founding myth of Rome. And so, I mean, he's got political aims in it, which is sometimes why the Aeneid gets dogged, right?
That's exactly
right. Augustus definitely has political aims and why he's having Virgil write this. But Virgil, he comes out on top. Go ahead.
I have a hot take about this very subject, but I do want to first just reiterate what you're saying. The complaint about the Aeneid is that it's really elegant, really sophisticated, poetic propaganda for the empire and the emperor.
Yeah.
And there are parts of it that, there's a really strong case to be made that
totally
this is propaganda. But I think it's much more than propaganda. I think it's much deeper than propaganda. And that's what my hot take is going to be about. Okay, so what's the story? Yeah.
You're not giving your hot take yet.
No. I'm saving it.
Oh, okay.
I'm saving it.
Okay. We could say in lesser hands, it would have just been plain old propaganda, but in Virgil's hands.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. We're talking about one of the poets of all time. Again, the Christian tradition has revered Virgil, giving him a pretty unique place as, yes, he's a pagan. He was born before the time of Christ, but some Christians in the day, back closer to his era, believed that Virgil actually wrote a kind of prophetic, messianic picture of the coming of Christ in a different poem, the Eclogues. So he's really revered by Christians. And of course, Dante, 1300 years later, is going to make Virgil the famous guide to Dante's Divine Comedy, one of the arch poems of all time. Okay, what is the story that the Aeneid is telling? It's basically telling the story, Emily, of the losing team from the Iliad, isn't it?
Yes, it's the losing team. Except that's why Caesar Augustus needs it written, because they're going to be the team in this rendition, right?
So in the Trojan War, the Trojans, the people of Troy, were fighting the Greeks, the people from Spain, the people from Greece. And what happens? Well, the Greeks win. There's a famous moment where a huge hollow horse is pushed inside the walls of Troy. And the Greeks are like, hey, this is a peace offering. We're going back home. Have a great time. Celebrate. We couldn't beat you guys. Good luck. And then they all climbed inside this great cavernous beast that they had built, this hollow horse. And in the middle of the night, after the horse had been brought inside the walls of Troy, the Greeks let down and set fire to the city. And we actually get an account of this in Virgil's Aeneid, famous account of the burning of Troy. Okay, so the Iliad tells the story from the Greek point of view. This is what happened in the Trojan War. And the Aeneid is telling the story of what happened to the survivors of that war after their city, Troy, was burned to the ground. Emily, where is Troy located on a modern map?
It's in modern day Turkey, I believe, isn't it?
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
There's a story, and we can talk about this some other time maybe, but it's long been believed that Troy is pure fiction, just something kind of dreamed up by the poets of Greece and Rome. But there was a German businessman in the 19th century who loved Homer and believed that Troy was a real fate. He believed. And he funded his own expedition to the coast of Turkey. And what did he find out? There was an actual city of Troy. He found the old city of Troy. That's right. So it's not pure mythology. My hunch, Emily, is that these are probably exaggerated historical figures like Aeneas. I suspect there was a real Aeneas who's been really inflated over the centuries to be this unconquerable hero who embodies the great Roman virtues. That's kind of the way that I look at it. I don't think it's just pure fiction.
You know who has a great modern encapsulation of this, or like a modern way of saying it, is Tolkien in the Lord of the Rings, right?
Oh, what does he say?
Well, he just talks about how fact passes into myth, fact passes into history, which passes into myth, right? That there's these long held memories. And yeah, I completely agree that these people, it's one of those things that we were talking about before with history, looking for verifiable forensic fact rather than seeing, it's kind of like these things have passed into this long cherished old knowledge that extends beyond even a written record, right? Because these are still, well, that's also an interesting contrast. This was written, but Homer was recited. And this was still meant to be recited.
Yes, but it was first written, and that's a big difference. That's a big difference.
It is a big difference.
Who was Aeneas? So let's imagine, Emily, that you and I are Romans from 0 AD, right? And we crack open, we roll out our scroll of the Aeneid, and we begin to read, and we hear about this Aeneas. We already know something about Aeneas because he's such a famous figure in the Roman imagination. And I'll tell you a little bit about who he is by telling you about a soccer shirt that my mom and dad got me when they were in
A
Rome.
soccer shirt.
A
What
soccer
are we
shirt.
talking about?
So my mom and dad bought me a soccer jersey
Oh,
from AS Roma, a
okay.
famous soccer club.
Okay.
And on the shirt, the chest of the shirt, it has an insignia. It has a logo. And do you know what the
I know.
logo is of? Do you know?
I know where it's going. Yes,
You-
it's the famous symbol of Rome, right?
The famous symbol of Rome. It's a
Romulus and
she-wolf.
Remus.
That's right. It's a she-wolf who's nursing two boys, Romulus and Remus. Romulus and Remus, according to the myth, were raised by a she-wolf, and then they later grew up, became incredible warriors until Romulus, Rome takes his name, kills Remus in a fight as they're building the walls of Rome. Why is this important? How does this relate to Aeneas? Because Aeneas is their great forebear. He is the kind of like many generations removed grandfather of Romulus and Remus, the first great kind of warrior figure in the Roman imagination. So we show up as, ancient Romans reading about this Aeneas, and we know that's who he is. Now, what is the virtue? What is the thing that we as ancient Romans are going to respect the most about Aeneas? There's a central virtue that he has. Do you know what it might be, Emily?
Yeah, I do, because this is a central virtue to all of Rome. They have their great virtues like gravitas, but this is pietas.
Pietas. And how would that translate to English for us?
It translates piety, but I often think that that's an unhelpful translation.
Agreed.
Because when we think piety, we think sort of the church lady, like pursed lips and folded hands. And that is not piety in the Roman sense.
That is not piety in the Roman sense.
Piety in the Roman sense encompasses the duty that a Roman feels towards, religion as we think of it doesn't exist in Rome. Like, it's all of a piece, right?
Yeah.
Duty to family, duty to country, duty to the gods. It's
duty
all
to
of
your
one
forebears.
thing. Yes. Very serious duty to your forebears. It's so important. That sense of, they call them the most maiorum, the ways of our betters. And our betters, that's literally what maiorum means. Our betters are our forebears, right?
Yeah.
So, right. A big slight in ancient Rome is to be called new.
Right. Yes, that's right.
To have new ideas, right? Because that's not taking into consideration the ways of the old.
You and I were just talking about Caesar's Gallic Wars. And I remember reading that Caesar, at one point, when he was becoming more and more dissatisfied with the Roman Republic and begins thinking grand dreams of making himself a new king or an emperor, he begins to wear his toga just a little bit closer to the tip of his shoulder. And this is a signal. I am doing something different. I am doing something new. And his friends began to do it. And that sounds like nothing to us. There's so many different variations and styles. But to this culture, there is, because pietas is so crucial to the whole, to everything about the way that life is done. Wearing your toga just 2 inches off is a signal of new and dangerous ideas.
Noah race. New things. Bad.
New things.
Bad.
Danger.
Danger.
We see really early on in the Aeneid, named after Aeneas, a very famous scene. Troy is burning. Aeneas is faithful to his family. He pulls his elderly father onto his back and races from the flames with his father draped on his shoulders. And so we can see in this picture, and there have been so many classical paintings of this scene.
There have. It's such a beautiful image, isn't it?
It's a beautiful image. And his wife and his son are in tow, his father on his back. His heart is Aeneas's heart is set on the founding of a new country but in doing so, he is faithful to where he came from. This is going to become a problem when Aeneas falls in love with
Big
someone
problem.
who is not of his people. It's going to be a massive problem. Okay. So let's just dig into the plot a little bit. The Aeneas is telling the story of Aeneas, and the Aeneid is telling the story of Aeneas and his men fleeing Troy, getting swept and battered and battled just like Odysseus and his men. He loses his wife actually before they leave Troy. He returns to Troy, the flames everywhere, and he meets his wife's shade, his wife's spirit. And she tells him that he cannot return home, that he must go become a great ruler in some other land.
You know, it also reminds me of Abraham being sent out from, in search of the promised land.
Yes, that's right.
It's that very similar, that journey forward into the unknown, nowhere to turn, cannot go back. But doesn't know what is, right?
Yeah.
Where is this place?
Yeah. So he and his men go in search of it, and they are quickly opposed by Juno, the goddess. She's
so mad.
Hates him. Oh, she hates him so much. And we can hear it in the very first lines of the epic.
Yes.
I sing of arms and the man being Aeneas, who, exiled by fate, hurled about endlessly by land and sea, by cruel Juno's remorseless anger, until he founded a city, the walls of noble Rome. Why is she so mad, Emily?
Well, she's mad. I think she's mad for a number of reasons, but she's really mad because in the beauty contest, she wasn't chosen. Venus was chosen. But that's with Paris. Right.
But she's hanging on to it.
She is, but she's
Venus
also
is the forebear of Venus is the forebear of Aeneas. So this is like Aeneas's mom beat Juno in a beauty contest.
Definitely. But then you also get that Juno, she just likes to oppose Zeus too, or Jupiter. I mean, she just does, So there's a little bit of that same thing as in the Iliad of like, well, why do you have it out for him? Okay, you lost a beauty contest. We get that.
Right. But why did now you've developed an oppositional defiant disorder?
Exactly,
like, is it really worth it, girl?
That's what it is, an oppositional defiant disorder.
Here's another big reason why.
Goddesses, I don't ever like Juno. Do you
no,
like
me
her?
neither. No, I don't
never
at all.
like her.
I really have a hard time with Juno. Let's pause and say that the last time we were discussing the gods, we were discussing the Greek gods. The Greek gods get digested by Rome, and they largely keep their identities. They just get new names. So Zeus, as you mentioned, becomes Jupiter. Poseidon becomes Neptune. Hera, wife of Zeus, becomes Juno.
Hey, do you say Hera? Because I always say Hera.
Oh, I don't know. I probably don't. It's probably Hera. I bet you're right.
That's fine.
Here's one other reason why Juno hates Aeneas. Juno loves the city of Carthage.
Right. That's the other reason.
She loves Carthage, it was at the time a world city in North Africa, one of the huge ports, and basically throughout the Roman history, Rome and Carthage hated each other. There was a famous senator, Cato the Older, I believe. He would finish every speech in the Senate, whether it had anything to do with Carthage or not. He would finish every speech. It could be on the sewer system, and he would say,
can I say it in Latin?
Yes, please. Oh, yeah, please. I want to hear this.
Carthaga delenda est.
And what does it mean?
Carthage must be destroyed.
Carthage must be destroyed. That's how much he and the Romans hated Carthage, but Juno loved Carthage. Okay, here is where the plot with Aeneas is about to get really thick. Now remember, this is a time before the animosity between Carthage and Rome.
Right. Right.
So this is an ancient story that's being told in 19 BC. In 19 BC, Romans hate Carthaginians, but Aeneas and his men sail to Carthage, and there's no animosity. They're just like, hey, can we hang out in your castle? And can we have a feast together?
And the queen is really beautiful.
And the queen is really beautiful. And oh my gosh, I recently lost my wife, and I'm like, kind of still getting over it. What's your name? My name is Queen Dido. I am Queen of Carthage. And Dido's impressive figure. Yeah, Dido is, right, she lost her husband, but she's also kind of like, she's sworn an allegiance to his memory. She's not going to remarry. She's an incredible builder. She's an incredible administrator. I mean, she's got everything. She's the total package.
Yeah.
Now,
she is.
Juno, up to her wiles, is like, oh, I got a plan. I've got a plan. Dido and Aeneas, they've got to fall in love. So she creates opportunities for them to go on walks together. They create opportunities there. And Dido listens to Aeneas' tales of suffering and the burning of Troy and the loss of his wife. And then he's lost his father by that point. And Dido's listening to all this. Her heart is breaking for this incredible, brave soldier. And of course, she's falling in love. So one day, the two of them go out. They neglect their leadership duties. They go out hunting. A massive storm gets swept in by Juno.
By Juno,
always
of course
by
it
Juno. So this huge storm sweeps up. Aeneas and Dido run into the cave, and it's the moment they've been waiting for. They can't control their passion any longer. They fall into each other's arms, and their passions overcome them. Now, almost immediately afterwards, what happens? What happens is that there is a calling, basically from Jupiter himself. Aeneas, you got to go.
You got to go.
This is not the plan.
Yep.
You've got to get back in your ship, and you've got to sail toward the Italian peninsula, or whatever it's called. You've got to sail toward Italy. So Aeneas, and this is a major discussion point, I think, Emily. Aeneas gets in the boat with his men, and he takes off. He makes an apology to Dido first.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a little carried away. I'm sorry, but the gods are calling me.
And
you
I have
understand.
to go.
I gotta go. You get it, right, Dido? No, actually, I don't understand. I don't understand at all. She is absolutely enraged. She has given up so much to fall in love with him. She's broken her word to her dead husband. She has opened the city gates to a man who is now like her absolute rival. So what happens?
Well, it's immortalized. And so, I mean, this tale right here, right? I mean, if you don't know anything else about the Aeneid, you know this, because it's immortalized in so many things. She laments and then she kills herself.
Right.
Right?
T.S. Eliot calls this scene, I think he calls it something like the saddest episode in all of Western literature.
Okay, and you know who else cried about this?
Who? Augustine. Augustine did.
Yeah. In his Confessions, he makes this whole point about how he was so heartbroken at this moment and crying. But he says, but I didn't have tears for my own sin or my own waywardness for God, but I was broken by the story of Dido and Aeneas. Because it's so
tragic.
Tragic.
She falls on to commit suicide. She falls on the sword that Aeneas has left behind.
Oh.
Like just making it even more poignant. Okay, I got to ask you, Emily, when you read this, do you just think, Aeneas, you're such a cad. How can you do this? Or do you think, the guy's got to follow the gods? Jupiter, what are you going to do? Like Jupiter, I got something like my boo is here. I can't go.
I think that this is why the Aeneid is hard for modern people to read, because we are so influenced by the Romantics.
Yes.
The Romantics of the 19th century. But we read it and we're just like, no, follow your heart, right?
Yeah.
That's
right.
what everybody says. Follow your heart. But I have to say, kind of love it that he leaves.
Well, it's in keeping with
virtuous.
And it's in keeping with what the book sets up as virtuous also.
Exactly. I mean, if he had done that, he would be such a scourge to his people, right? Because you don't do that. You don't forget the weight of these generations. Because don't forget, like, the picture of him carrying his father on the back is like the weight of generation.
Right.
He's carrying the weight of generations on his
100%.
And that is the picture that's given. And how can you, for this beautiful thing, the love between he and Dido, forget all of that? Because it's not just you. That's the thing. It's not just for Aeneas. It's your people.
Yeah.
And I also think as individualistic people of the 21st century, we find that hard to understand.
Yeah.
Because it's not just
very hard to understand. Yeah.
I mean, and so so I think a lot of people, especially students, read it and but it is funny that even Augustine felt that way.
I know.
That's, in the 400s, he felt that. He felt like
incredibly moving. Yeah.
Okay, but we haven't even talked about war yet.
Well, okay, so
we haven't even talked about war. This is about war. This should be in our love podcast.
I know it should. Well, maybe we'll come back and do it because, I mean, we love the Aeneid, so we'll do the Aeneid twice. Aeneid, the love chapters. That's what we'll do when we do like a season on love.
Because it really is seen. It's seen as the great love story, right?
It is. The great tragic love story. Aeneas and his men leave Carthage and they arrive on the shores of Italy. So there is now a massive turn in the book. We go from travelogue like the Odyssey. We are now shifting into war like the Iliad. And there's a major turning point, which is a trip that Aeneas takes into the underworld. It is one of the most famous scenes from this book. It is a replica of a trip to the underworld that happens with Odysseus. There are echoes of it in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So this idea, this literary trope of a journey into the underworld kind of gets repeated through these really famous, important pieces of literature. And it's an absolute turning point in this part of the book. But I just want to say, when they land on Italy, things are kind of cool for a while. They're meeting new tribes. They meet the king. And the king is like, oh, you're single, Aeneas? Because I've got a daughter, and maybe we can make a bargain here. Aeneas seems to be interested in that. The only problem is she's already got a suitor, a guy named Turnus. He's a very bad man, Emily. A very bad man. But the turning point in the book is this trip to the underworld. And that's where I want to go. And this is going to set up the hot take for the Aeneid. Okay. Book 6, the thematic centerpiece of the book. Aeneas descends into the other underworld and he meets his now deceased father, Anchises. In the underworld, Anchises has a prophetic vision that he plays out in front of Aeneas. It's a vision of Rome's future. And we can see a long and glorious line of heroes, beginning with Aeneas, going through the great Roman kings, culminating in Julius Caesar, and in Julius Caesar's nephew, Caesar Augustus, and Caesar Augustus's sister's son. Why is this important? Marcellus. Marcellus died of illness during a battle encampment. And it is said that when Virgil read Book 6 in front of Caesar Augustus and Octavia, Octavia hears the name of Marcellus and is overcome at the, like, remembering the loss of her son, and she faints. It's how powerful it is to the ruler and his sister. Back to the Underworld story. At the end of this long vision, Father gives Aeneas guidance. It's not just about the future of Rome, but it's the way that Aeneas is supposed to comport himself as the first and the greatest of the Romans. The way forward is by rule and dominion. They, the Trojans, are going to be a law-giving people, and they'll be celebrated around the world for their ability to rule. And you know what? Kind of hard to argue with. Like the Roman people, the Roman nation lasts for 1,000 years, right?
Yeah,
and so,
I mean, and even at this point, it's going to last another 400.
Yeah.
After,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
right.
already been, right? It's been going for
Right, because
700.
we're out of the Republic by this point, at the writing of this book. The Republic has ended with Julius Caesar, and we're into the Empire, and we still got 400 more years before the Empire collapses.
Yeah. It's quite an achievement, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it involved a ton of butchery, and that is taking us closer to our hot take. Here's the catch about the prophecy. Anchises, father of Aeneas, says this to Aeneas: "You, Roman, remember these will be your arts, to teach the ways of peace to those you conquer, to spare the defeated and tame the proud." A father giving his last instruction to his son about the way that he wants to be in the world, to spare the defeated and to tame the proud. Okay.
It's a bit ironic in light of the Gallic Wars, isn't it?
It is a bit ironic because we're reading. A little bit. Yeah. If you didn't listen to the last podcast on the Gallic Wars, Julius Caesar, is celebrating the slaughter of 250,000 people. And he's like, yeah, I did it. I did it. What are you going to say about it?
Yeah.
Right? So this is a tension in the Roman mind. It is a tension that there seems to be very little regard given to human life. And yet, in their founding myth, there is a command from father to son.
To do this.
Teach the ways of peace to those you conquer, spare the defeated, tame the proud.
Well, we have to say, to be fair to the Romans, as conquerors go, they were pretty good. As conquerors go, they were pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, they, even with the Jews, they let the Jews have a lot of self-determination. They were pretty willing to let you have but the Jews were so devoted to the one true God that they wouldn't take what the Romans offered. Another interesting word that I didn't mention in the Gallic Wars, but it comes up a lot with Caesar, is clementia, which is clemency, which is sparing. And Caesar, even in the Gallic Wars, and he talks about it more in the Civil Wars, he wants to be known for his clementia, which is clemency, sparing the defeated. So it is interesting that Virgil sort of picks that up, because that's definitely part of how Julius Caesar wanted to see himself.
Right.
Which is interesting.
So, Emily.
Okay. What's your hot take?
Here it is. My hot take is about the very last lines of the Aeneid. Here's the setup. The battles between Aeneas and his men begin battling these different tribes. So at first things are peaceful. Maybe Lavinia is going to marry Aeneas. The king is cool with these new guys from Troy. Hey, yeah, pick yourself out some land and make yourself at home. But the other tribes are like, we hate them. We want them to go. And so war. Like the last 5 books are all about war. And it culminates, as does the Odyssey, with a showdown between the 2 great warriors from either side. Aeneas, of course, and Turnus. Okay, who is Turnus? Turnus is the Rutulian leader. He's a prince. an incredible warrior. And also, I think the best word to describe Turnus is he's a berserker. When he fights, he sees red, he goes insane, and he is a unmitigated slaughterer. And he's the guy on the playground that's like, he's shorter, he's scrawny, but all the bigger guys are like, do not mess with him. Like, there's so much fight in that dog. You just don't want any part of it. That's Turnus plus the stature and brawn of a great warrior. That's who Turnus is. So Turnus, Aeneas meet in the field of battle. They duke it out. Aeneas finally gains the upper hand. He knocks him down, and he's standing over Turnus, and he's remembering, it doesn't say this in the text, but the words from the father, teach the ways of peace to those you conquer, spare the defeated and tame the proud. And it seems like Turnus submits. He submits. He's not going to fight, right? But what happens? Aeneas, looking down on him, sees a belt that Turnus is wearing. The belt was taken from a young Roman warrior that Aeneas loved. He loved this young Roman warrior, Pallas. And he sees this belt and he remembers Turnus slaughtering Pallas. And so, Emily, what does Aeneas do? He slaughters Turnus. Turnus has kind of repented, we would say, and it doesn't matter. He just slaughters him in front of everybody. So here's the hot take.
Okay, I'm ready.
Is our poet Virgil saying, look, Romans, we're this incredible warrior people, and we're also claiming to be the lawgivers, the people of peace, the people who spare the defeated, who tame the proud. Maybe we can't actually be both. Maybe we just got to own it. We're a warrior people. We're a bloodthirsty people. And even our founder, who was commanded by his father, live a life of peace, even he becomes a berserker because of what war does to you.
Falls short of the ideal.
That's right. That hot take is taken from a scholar named Elizabeth Vandiver. I'd never heard it before, and I listened to it after I had been teaching the Aeneid for a few years, and I thought, that's a really powerful insight, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to me too. That's the in less well-developed hands, this becomes just boilerplate propaganda.
Yeah.
Right. But
in the
Virgil
hands of
is really a master.
Yes, absolutely.
So he's able to fulfill Augustus's aims while still possibly
smuggling in a question.
Yep.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, because, it's pretty dangerous to be the poet to the emperor of Rome.
Yeah. It's you're taking your life in your own hands. If you don't get it right, your shoulder and your head could be separated.
Oh, that's a great hot take.
Thanks. I like that too. Yeah, again, just a shout out to Elizabeth Vandiver. Really insightful, really, really good scholarship, I thought. Hey, so that is Virgil's Aeneid. We absolutely recommend it to you. A wonderful piece of work. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast. As always, thanks to our producer, Clark Stefanik. Thanks to True North, our platform. If you like this show, you might like the Classical U podcast, in which Jesse Hake, the director of Classical U, presents teachers, presenters, scholars who are in the classical education universe. A lot of really interesting conversations. Karen Elliott, also from the Rafiki Foundation podcast, she provides classical education for schools in Africa, and she's got a podcast on the True North platform. We encourage you to check it out. Our music was written and performed by Tom Hagerman. Emily, it's always a pleasure.
Great to talk to you, Tim.
See you on the next one.
Sounds great.